What if the romantic getaway you planned to rekindle a fading love turned into the single most shocking moment of your life? Imagine standing on a picturesque cliff in Italy, believing you've finally repaired the cracks in your relationship, only to be blindsided by a revelation you never saw coming. This isn't just another travel story. It's the unraveling of a bond that once felt unbreakable. The kind of bond you'd bet your future on. From the outside, our relationship seemed perfect. Jay and I had been together for 2 years, and for a long time, everything felt effortless, like we were a team of two against the world. We laughed easily, shared silly late-night conversations, and dreamed of exploring new places hand in hand. Even mundane tasks like grocery shopping became miniature adventures when we were side by side. But no one tells you how quickly routine can turn into distance, or how swiftly love can morph into resentment when life becomes a constant rush. Looking back, I wonder if the seeds of our downfall were planted well before we even left for Italy. The truth is, cracks always appear before anyone notices, and if you don't pay attention, they can split open into an abyss that swallows everything you once cherished. The warning signs were there, but I was too caught up in my new job and the lure of success to see them clearly. You might want to brace yourself for what happened next, because it made the happiness we once had feel like a distant memory. It started with a small promotion at work, an opportunity I'd been chasing for years. At first, I was elated, picturing how this new paycheck would help fund future vacations, a potential wedding, and maybe even a cozy house in the suburbs. Jay supported me wholeheartedly, or at least I thought she did. She'd laugh and say, "I'm proud of you," whenever I left for those extra long work hours. But soon, the phone began buzzing at dinner time. Requests for weekend meetings piled up. Emails were no longer confined to 9 to 5, and the boundary between personal life and office responsibilities blurred completely. I told myself it was a temporary sacrifice, but temporary sacrifices have a way of becoming permanent. Gradually, the sweet, unplanned moments between Jay and me disappeared. Before I knew it, entire weeks passed without us sharing a real conversation. She tried to stay supportive, but I could sense a quiet tension building beneath her kind words. Bit by bit, date nights turned into canceled evenings. We'd share polite smiles over rushed meals, but inside, we were both screaming for attention, for connection, for some reminder of what we used to be. Nothing huge exploded, yet just a steady, growing distance that neither of us knew how to bridge. Sometimes, I wonder if she reached out to friends or family, asking them for advice on how to handle my absence. Most people think relationships end with a dramatic fight, but that's not always the case. Sometimes, the real culprit is neglect, small, sharp splinters of pain that accumulate until they form a wedge you can't remove. We let those splinters pile up far too long, setting the stage for everything that would happen in Italy. Realizing how close we were to losing each other, I decided to pull off a grand gesture. Italy had always been Jay's dream. Somewhere she'd mentioned visiting one day, when the timing was right and the stars aligned. So, I took it upon myself to align those stars. I booked the flights, found the coziest boutique hotels, and mapped out the perfect romantic itinerary. I imagined us sipping wine beneath Tuscan sunsets, letting the hustle of daily life fade behind the rolling hills and ancient cityscapes. More than that, I imagined us remembering how to love without the weight of obligations pressing on our shoulders. In my mind, this was our chance to reclaim what we'd lost. When I surprised Jay with the tickets, her entire face lit up. For a moment, it felt like the tension of the past few months melted away, replaced by the bright spark I'd fallen in love with. Watching her smile, I felt confident this trip would be our chance to heal. We'd finally break free from that unspoken strain, reconnect, and come back stronger than ever. The flight to Rome was filled with lively chatter, and we found ourselves holding hands the entire way, as though even the small physical gesture could anchor us back to the people we once were. If only I had known that hopes can be dashed as easily as they are raised. Hope can be the greatest illusion. Sometimes it's real, but other times it simply masks the deeper fractures lurking beneath. As we strolled through the ancient streets, I clung to the promise of renewal, unaware that destiny had something far more complicated in store for us both. Italy was breathtaking beyond words. We started in Venice, drifting along the canals at sunset, laughter bouncing off the water. Jay wore a light sundress, and I remember how her hair caught the golden glow from the setting sun. For the first time in months, it felt like we were returning to ourselves, two people genuinely in love, unburdened by stress. Our dinners in hidden trattorias under twinkling lights felt magical, as though the universe had granted us a brief reprieve from reality. I was certain that if a place could heal us, Italy was that place. In Rome, we shared a bowl of fresh pasta in an ivy-covered courtyard, clinking glasses over a shared vow to leave our differences behind and focus on what truly mattered. She looked at me with those bright eyes and asked if I could remember the last time we were so happy. I thought about it, realized it had been far too long, and promised we'd never let work or stress stand between us again. It was a vow I fully intended to keep, not knowing how little control I actually had over what would come next. It's staggering how a single decision can derail the best-laid plans. One moment, everything can seem perfect, like life's finally giving you a well-deserved break. The next moment, a single sentence can rip away every bit of peace you've fought to restore. And that sentence came crashing down on me in the most unlikely place, on a cliff overlooking the sea in Naples. On our final day, we stood at the edge of a rocky vista, the turquoise water of the Mediterranean shimmering below. The scene was so beautiful it felt surreal, like a painting we'd stepped into. Jay went quiet, her gaze locked on the horizon. I assumed she was savoring the moment, or perhaps feeling melancholic about returning home. But as the wind picked up, so did a tension in the air. She turned to me, her expression unreadable. Then she confessed that she wanted to stay in Italy, alone. It was so unexpected that my first reaction was disorientation rather than outright anger. I blinked, uncertain if I'd misheard her. We'd planned this trip to reconnect, so the idea of her extending her stay without me felt like an unexpected betrayal. I asked her what she meant, trying to keep my voice calm, but I could feel my heart racing. She explained she needed more time to find herself, that she wasn't ready to go back to the life we had, and that she thought some distance might help her figure out if we were still right for each other. The moment felt colder than any winter I'd experienced, though we were standing under the bright Italian sun. A swirl of uncertainty rushed in. Was our relationship not as strong as I believed? How do you respond when the person you love most drops a bombshell that changes everything? Do you fight for them, or do you accept the heartbreak and move on? In that single instant, I realized that while I was planning a happily ever after, Jay was quietly planning a life that no longer involved me, or so it seemed. My shock blurred into anger, then circled back to a gut-wrenching sadness. I wanted to ask if she'd been lying every time she'd smiled or held my hand during this trip. But beneath it all, I felt the sting of betrayal. Did she plan this all along? Or was this a sudden epiphany? With my voice shaking, I told her I'd support her decision, if that's what she truly needed. But I also mentioned that if she chose to stay, she would have to handle her own expenses from that point forward. We had come here together under a specific plan. If she was rewriting the rules, I couldn't be the one footing the bill. In that moment, it felt like my words were echoing into an emotional void. Her outrage flared like a match tossed into a dry field. She accused me of leaving her stranded in a foreign country. She said my love was conditional if I wouldn't pay for her extended stay. I tried to explain that my refusal to fund her sudden plan wasn't about punishing her. It was about boundaries and fairness. I'd saved up for this trip for both of us, not for her solo journey. Yet, my words fell on deaf ears. The look in her eyes told me she'd already decided I was the villain in her story. It was as though everything we'd shared evaporated in the face of this one disagreement. Is it ever really about money, or is that just the scapegoat for deeper issues? The echoes of her accusations haunted me. If we couldn't see eye to eye on something this fundamental, maybe our problems were more profound than either of us realized. And the unraveling had only begun. After a tense night wrapped in uneasy silence, I flew home alone. The trip that was supposed to save our relationship ended with a lonely plane ride and a heavy weight in my chest. I hoped that once Jay had some time to think, she'd realize how extreme her decision seemed. But once I landed, a new type of drama awaited me. Within days, our mutual friends got wind of what happened. I started getting calls and messages with a mixture of criticism and concern. It was like walking into a storm of disapproval. "Dude, you just abandoned her overseas?" one friend asked in disbelief. Another told me I was too harsh by cutting her off financially. It felt like everyone was choosing sides based on the superficial details, without truly grasping the complexity of what had occurred. All they saw was a boyfriend refusing to pay for his girlfriend's extended vacation. They didn't see the confusion and hurt roiling inside me. They didn't consider that perhaps Jay's move was a betrayal of the unity we'd been trying so hard to rebuild. Perceptions can be deceptive, especially when fueled by half-told stories. Public opinion can be brutal, especially when it's fueled by half-truths and emotional bias. But little did I know, the whispering among our friends would be nothing compared to the tidal wave of secrets that was about to crash down on my already fragile world. Weeks passed. Our communication was minimal, short, clipped texts that felt colder than winter winds. Each day, I wrestled with frustration and heartbreak. I replayed the idyllic moments in Venice and Rome, trying to reconcile those memories with the reality of her abandonment on that cliff. Then, out of nowhere, she showed up at our apartment, letting herself in with her key as if everything were normal. I recall sitting on the couch, hearing the door click open and feeling my heart plummet. The tension in the room skyrocketed the instant she stepped inside. It was a tension thick enough to choke on. She looked different, tired, restless, and carrying a hardened aura, as though she'd been through her own personal war. Before I could even ask how she was, her anger flared. "How could you just cut me off like that?" she shouted, voice thick with resentment. I tried explaining that she was the one who changed our plan, not me. But she repeated the same accusations of being left stranded, framing me as a heartless tyrant who'd chosen money over love. For a moment, I doubted myself. Was I being too harsh? Could I have supported her differently? Yet deep down, I knew this situation was more complicated than mere financial support. Sometimes, the more you defend yourself, the more guilty you appear in someone else's narrative. And in that moment, a nagging voice inside me wondered whether all this anger masked a deeper, more consequential secret, one that neither of us was ready to confront. She stormed out again, slamming the door with a force that rattled picture frames on the walls. Friends who heard about our latest blow-up offered unsolicited opinions. Some tried to be neutral, while others condemned me outright. My frustration grew. I was hurting too, and no one seemed to notice. To protect my mental health, I withdrew from most social events, focusing instead on my work. That's when I ran into Ben, a friend I trusted more than anyone else. He looked uneasy, like he was sitting on a time bomb of information he didn't want to deliver. Yet there was a resolve in his eyes, as if he knew it was time to spill the truth. Over a late-night coffee, he confessed that Jay had borrowed money from relatives during her extended stay, suggesting she was partying, living it up, and possibly seeing someone else. My stomach lurched. This was not the careful, sensible Jay I remembered. Worse, Ben revealed she might be pregnant, and there were rumors she planned to pin the responsibility on me. I felt the ground vanish beneath my feet. The shock left me breathless, as though I'd jumped into icy water without warning. Was this truly happening, or was it just malicious gossip? You might think heartbreak has a limit, but it doesn't. Just when you believe you've hit rock bottom, someone hands you a shovel. Knowing Jay could be pregnant and might claim I was the father sent me into a spiral of dread and confusion, and the surprises weren't over yet. Despite the panic, I forced myself to remain calm. I spent nights pacing my living room, replaying every conversation and every intimate moment Jay and I ever shared. Could it even be mine? Had she been unfaithful during our time apart? Were the rumors just idle gossip from bored acquaintances? Or was there a real risk I'd be dragged into something I never asked for? Each question felt like a punch to my gut. I wanted to confront her, but fear kept me from sending that message. I even considered calling her mother, someone who'd always been supportive of our relationship but hesitated, not wanting to drag family members into our chaos. Finally, I met with Kay, Jay's closest friend since college. She wasn't the type to sugarcoat the truth, and I needed straight answers more than anything. Over hot espresso in a tiny cafe, Kay admitted it was true. Jay had partied extensively and met someone during her extra time in Italy. Though Kay didn't know all the details, she confirmed that Jay was indeed expecting. My pulse roared in my ears. Everything around me fell silent, except for Kay's voice, as she dropped one last revelation. A paternity test confirmed I wasn't the father, That one fact changed the narrative completely, but it didn't lessen the heartbreak. Betrayal is painful enough, but discovering she'd planned to convince me I was the child's father felt like a different level of deception. The lines between genuine emotion and calculated manipulation blurred, leaving me wondering if I'd ever really known Jay at all. Kay's eyes brimmed with pity. She explained that Jay was terrified of being alone, of the scandal, and of the future she never intended to create. In her panic, she thought that somehow pulling me back in would fix everything. Maybe she assumed if she could convince me the baby was mine, we'd reconcile, pick up our old plans, and shield her from the reality she'd stumbled into. I felt a swirl of anger and heartbreak, but also a flicker of empathy. Jay must have been drowning in confusion to resort to such a drastic move. It made me recall small instances in the past where she'd seemed insecure, but never to this degree. I left that cafe with my head spinning. My entire relationship with Jay played like a rerun in my mind. Only now I saw missed cues and subtle signs. Had she been drifting away for longer than I realized? Or was this reckless decision a spontaneous act, born from fear of losing the life we'd built together? Either way, the facts couldn't be undone. I knew what needed to happen next, but the reality of confronting her felt like stepping into a lion's den. I wondered if this confrontation would lead to closure or ignite an even bigger firestorm. When you discover a secret that monumental, there's no going back to normal. The only choice is to confront it head-on, but doing so can set off a chain reaction of drama you can't fully control. I braced myself, knowing this confrontation might be the final chapter of our tumultuous journey. 3 days of soul-searching passed. I weighed every option. Should I cut off contact entirely and protect myself? Should I demand an explanation from Jay, hoping to salvage even the tiniest shred of respect between us? I decided closure was essential. Without it, the ghosts of what we once had, and what we almost became, would haunt me indefinitely. So I texted Jay, requesting to meet at our favorite coffee shop, the place where we'd once shared sugary pastries and big dreams. Just sending that text made my heart pound. She arrived first, eyes swollen and downcast, as though she'd spent the entire night crying. I sat across from her, and for a moment neither of us spoke. I finally told her I knew the truth, about Italy, about the other man, and about the baby that wasn't mine. Her tearful eyes confirmed what Kay had said. She whispered through trembling lips that she was desperate. She wanted us back, wanted to pretend the child could be ours, that everything could be pieced together with a well-placed lie. The magnitude of her desperation and betrayal struck me like a physical blow, leaving me both furious and heartbroken. She reached across the table for my hand, but I pulled away. Sometimes, you walk into a final conversation expecting rage, but you're met with regret and sorrow so profound it disarms you. However, sympathy can't always resurrect a dead relationship. And in that coffee shop, I realized our love was irreparably changed. Gathering what remained of my composure, I told Jay I would help clear some of the debts she'd amassed abroad as a final gesture of the love that once bound us. But any hope of rekindling our relationship was gone. You can't force trust once it's been shattered. She wept, apologizing over and over, saying it was a mistake. That fear had driven her to do things she'd never imagined herself capable of. I believed she was genuinely remorseful, but it didn't change the outcome. We both understood that some lines can never be uncrossed. As I walked away, I felt a bittersweet heaviness. The world outside was just going about its day, people sipping lattes, scrolling through phones, entirely unaware of the emotional cataclysm taking place at a tiny table in the corner. Life goes on, whether your heart is breaking or not. And so, with one last exhale, I let that chapter of my life close. Helping her financially might have seemed odd to some, but I needed to do it for my own peace to ensure I never looked back, wondering if I'd acted cruelly in my final decision. It was the last vestige of compassion I could offer her. Or maybe it was a way to offer compassion to myself. Endings are rarely clean. You can walk out of a door, but the memories follow you. Yet, sometimes endings are also beginnings, a step toward reclaiming a version of yourself you thought was lost. And that's exactly what I discovered in the days that followed. Over the next few weeks, I found myself in a state of introspection. Where had it all gone so wrong? And What role did I play in the unraveling? It was easy to blame everything on her betrayal, but truthfully, our relationship began fraying well before Italy. Work consumed me, and I let it. Jay needed clarity about her own path, and she sought it in the worst way possible. Does that excuse her lies? Certainly not. But it reminded me that two people can contribute to a breakdown, each in their own way. This realization was both painful and oddly liberating. I also realized how vital it is to have a support system you trust. Social media and mutual acquaintances can twist a story, leaving you feeling like the villain when the truth is far more nuanced. Genuine friends, like Ben, were crucial in helping me keep my head above water. He didn't judge me for my choices. He merely offered understanding. Kay, despite her loyalty to Jay, still gave me the unvarnished facts, a kindness I'll forever appreciate. It's in moments of crisis that you discover who's willing to stick around when the facade of normality slips away, and that knowledge can be a small ray of hope in the darkness. Sometimes the aftermath is more illuminating than the event itself. You see people's true colors, your own strength, and the cracks in your old life you overlooked. Without the darkest nights, you might never appreciate the dawn that breaks afterward. Looking back, I also realized the significance of boundaries in communication. If Jay had felt lost or unsure about us, maybe she should have spoken up earlier. And if I'd been more attuned, perhaps I would have noticed the warning signs sooner. However, life doesn't give you do-overs. It only gives you lessons, some of which are painfully learned on the fly. The heartbreak in Italy was a harsh teacher, but it gave me clarity I never had before. I now know that ignoring emotional distance can be more destructive than any single act of betrayal. We often talk about heartbreak like it's the end of everything, but in many ways, it can be a beginning. In the weeks after our final talk, I took steps to rediscover myself. I reconnected with hobbies I'd shelved, sought therapy to process the betrayal, and even planned a solo trip, partly to prove to myself that I could forge new memories in places that once symbolized love and loss. Little by little, I felt more like the person I'd been before the job's demands and the relationship drama consumed me. There's an indescribable freedom in reclaiming your life on your own terms. Healing never happens overnight, and it certainly doesn't come without a few scars. But each scar tells a story, a reminder that you survived what you thought would break you. My story was far from over, and if you're facing something similar, neither is yours. In time, mutual friends began to understand the fuller picture. Some apologized for jumping to conclusions, while others stuck to their opinions. I learned that you can't control how people interpret your actions. You can only control how honest you are with yourself and how you choose to respond. The rumors about Jay eventually quieted down, replaced by new gossip that circulates in every social circle. As for Jay herself, I heard she moved in with a relative while deciding her next steps. The new life she's carrying will soon be her focus, and I sincerely wish her clarity and peace. Life marches forward, indifferent to who's left behind or who chooses to forge ahead. Despite everything, I hold onto the happy memories we shared, because I believe it's better to acknowledge they were real rather than pretend the entire relationship was a lie. There were genuine moments of joy and love, and they don't get erased just because of the heartbreak that followed. But I'm also aware that some lines, once crossed, can't be uncrossed, and some words, once spoken, can't be taken back. We were two people who lost our way, and in trying to regain control, we both made decisions that pushed us past the point of no return. Acceptance of that fact has been crucial for my healing. Life's chapters don't always end how we'd script them if we had the chance. Sometimes they end abruptly, with half-finished sentences and messy margins. But perhaps that's what makes the next chapter worth reading, because you get to start fresh, scribbling new lines on a blank page. As I wrap up this story, I can't help but reflect on how quickly everything changed. One moment, we were in love and traveling through Italy, weaving romantic daydreams. The next, we were practically strangers, waging a cold war of blame and secrets. If there's a final takeaway, it's that communication and honesty are crucial, even when they're uncomfortable. The illusions we maintain to protect ourselves or others might only lead to deeper pain in the end. When illusions shatter, the damage can be catastrophic. But from that wreckage, you can salvage truths that guide you to a more authentic path. If you find yourself in a similar crossroads, maybe not in Italy, Maybe not with a pregnancy scare, but in any situation where love and trust hang in the balance. Remember that clarity is often kinder than confusion. If your instincts tell you something's off, pay attention. If you feel neglected or misunderstood, speak up. Had either of us been more transparent, maybe we'd have salvaged something, or maybe the breakup would have been less traumatic. Either way, the brutal aftermath might have been avoided. Yet, it's in these painful lessons that we often find ourselves reborn. So what becomes of two people who once thought they'd found the one? Do they forever remain casualties of one betrayal, or do they learn and grow, forging healthier relationships in the future? That's a question only time and personal resolve can answer. In my case, I've decided to move forward with no regrets. Yes, it hurts. Yes, it's complicated. But clinging to anger or bitterness would only trap me in the past. Instead, I'm choosing to rebuild, to accept my part in the breakdown, and to step into a future that might be brighter for having endured the darkness. Will I trust as freely as before? Probably not. Will I love again? I hope so. Because if we stop believing in love after one betrayal, we do ourselves the greatest disservice. I refuse to let one heartbreak define the rest of my life's story. I also want to express gratitude to the many people, both online and offline, who offered words of advice, empathy, and experience. During the toughest moments, knowing you're not alone can be a powerful lifeline. Your stories, your messages, and your encouragement helped me navigate decisions I never imagined having to make. While the choice to move on ultimately came from me, having a community to lean on was invaluable. I've learned that even in the darkest times, someone else's words can light the smallest candle of hope. You might wonder if this is truly the end of the story, or if life has more curveballs to throw. The reality is, life always has surprises waiting around the corner. Whether they're pleasant or heartbreaking often depends on the lessons we've taken from our past. As for Jay, I believe she'll find her path, and part of me hopes she discovers what she was searching for on that cliff in Naples. Maybe she'll become the mother she never imagined she'd have to be. Maybe she'll find a new kind of happiness, one that isn't built on secrecy or running away. I don't know. Our paths may cross again in the future, or we might remain separated by oceans of memory and regret. And that's okay. Some relationships aren't meant to last forever. They're meant to teach us, shape us, and then fade out. The best we can do is honor the lessons and move forward. Walking away from someone you love is never easy, especially when the wounds are so fresh. But sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is let go. Holding on too tightly to something that's already broken can cut deeper than any blade. Setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's survival. By allowing ourselves to let go, we open the door to new possibilities, ones that might lead to healthier connections and experiences we can't envision yet. It's a leap of faith, but often a necessary one. No matter how shattered you feel right now, the pieces can be put back together, often in a way that reveals a stronger, more resilient version of yourself. Pain is a teacher, if you let it be. And the lessons I learned in Italy, painful as they were, became my stepping stones toward a new beginning. I'm sharing all of this not to paint myself as a victim, or Jay as a villain, but to show how a relationship can implode from both external pressures and internal fears. People make bad decisions when they're afraid. They lie, they manipulate, they grasp at illusions. But in the aftermath, there's still a choice: cling to bitterness or strive for understanding. I chose the latter, and while it doesn't erase the hurt, it helps me accept that we're all flawed, stumbling through life's chaos in search of happiness. Every mistake, mine, hers, everyone's, can be a stepping stone toward growth if we handle it with honesty. If you've stuck with me through this entire story, maybe you see a piece of your own journey reflected here. Perhaps you've experienced heartbreak, betrayal, or a moment where everything you believed in got turned upside down. If so, I hope my experience offers a small spark of hope that you can face the truth, however ugly, and still come out stronger. The scars become proof that you made it through. They can remind you that resilience is a muscle, and every time life tests you, it grows a little stronger. But remember, the story doesn't end with the scars. It continues with the wisdom you carry forward. So, if you're ready to turn the page, to write a new chapter for yourself, keep listening. Because life has a way of surprising you, just as it did me. In closing, I want to reiterate that no single event defines you. Not a disastrous trip, not a betrayal, not a moment of weakness or a choice made in fear. You are the sum total of every experience, every lesson, and every act of courage you show when faced with adversity. Sometimes, heartbreak is the catalyst we need to become better, stronger, and more mindful of what truly matters. It strips away illusions and forces us to confront our deepest vulnerabilities. So take a deep breath. Let the tears fall if they must, and remind yourself that every ending is also a beginning in disguise. I started this story with a question. What if a dream vacation turned into the biggest betrayal of your life? Now, I'll end with another. What if that betrayal was the spark that led you to a life where you finally put your own needs first, found genuine connections, and discovered a sense of self-love you never knew existed? That's worth pursuing, no matter how scary it may seem at first. It's a question worth pondering, isn't it? Because the answers you find might just reshape your entire destiny. Keep your heart open to the idea that sometimes the worst pain can guide you to the greatest personal breakthroughs. And with that, I leave you with my story of heartbreak, secrets, and the decision to walk away, not out of spite, but out of self-preservation and a desire for a better tomorrow. May it serve as a testament that even the most painful chapters can lead to renewal if you choose to learn from them. Life moves forward, and so can you. No matter how dark the moment seems right now, the days after heartbreak can be long and lonely, but they can also be filled with transformative self-discovery. Wherever you go from here, carry the lessons gently. You don't have to be defined by someone else's mistakes or even your own. Keep your head high, your heart open, and your boundaries firm, because life is too short to remain shackled by what could have been. Instead, focus on what can be, and trust that with every heartbreak, you gain the insight to love better, trust smarter, and stand taller than before. That, my friend, is the real gift in the rubble of any painful chapter.